Alright guys, so the first thing you're going to want to do is get underneath the car and spray the O2 sensor down with some sort of rust breaker spray. As you can see, I'm using PB Blaster, which I think is a great option. One quick note, you probably see that I have O2 sensor spacers on my car. Because of certain performance modifications I've made to my car, I'm required to have these. But chances are you don't have these, which means your O2 sensor is actually going to be screwed straight into the pipe. And where you're going to be spraying is right here, because that's where the rusty threads are. And we're doing this now so that when we come back to this later, it's going to make it a lot easier to break that O2 sensor free. So from here, we're actually going to move on to the next step and give the rust breaker spray time to do its thing. The next thing we got to do is remove this plastic panel from underneath the passenger side of the car. As you can see right here, that's the wire for the O2 sensor going underneath this panel, and there's really no way to get at it without taking this whole panel off. So what we got to do is take a 10mm socket and loosen all of these plastic fasteners. These are actually made to stay in place, so you don't have to actually take them out of the plastic panel. So just go up and down the panel and find all those fasteners. I believe there's 8 of them. Right about here, my panel was a little bit stuck at the front. At first I thought maybe there was something else I had to take off in order to get it out. But it turned out that it was in fact just a little bit stuck, and all I had to do was just pull on it a little bit more to get it out. So now with that panel removed, we're going to go back over by the O2 sensor and we're going to get the connector out of this plastic carrier. The way that I got it out was I actually pushed straight up on it first, and then I pushed the top of the connector away from me a little bit, and then I went back to pushing straight up and it came out. The next thing you're going to want to do is take a really small flathead screwdriver, and you're going to put it right inside the little opening on the front of the connector, and you're going to push down. And while you're doing that, take your other hand and push up on the connector and it should pop right off. Now it's time to remove the actual O2 sensor itself. What you're going to want to use is a special O2 sensor socket like I have here. As you can see, I had to modify mine a little bit. The slot on it was actually not quite wide enough to get around the wire. If you don't currently have one of these, I highly suggest getting one. It makes the job a lot easier. Not just for taking the old O2 sensor out, but also later on we're going to be using a torque wrench to tighten down the new one. And you can't really use a torque wrench with anything other than a socket. And once it breaks free, you can actually take the wrench off of it like I'm about to do here. Then just turn it out the rest of the way with your hand. Now I'm going to go ahead and apply a little bit of extra anti-seize to the threads on the new sensor. As I'm about to show you in a second, the sensor actually comes with a little anti-seize already on it. So technically you don't have to do this, but I don't think there's any harm in putting a little bit of extra on there. The only thing you have to be careful about is only getting the anti-seize on the threads of the sensor. Don't get it anywhere else. Alright, so now we're back under the car, obviously, and it's time to put the new sensor in. What you're going to want to do is actually get it started by hand so you don't cross thread. And then when you're sure it's threading in fine, go ahead and put the wrench on it. And just so there's no confusion, if you're somebody that doesn't have those O2 sensor spacers like I have, you're going to be screwing your O2 sensor straight into the pipe. And now here we're going to use the same socket that we used before to take the old one off. The one thing that's going to be different this time though is we're going to be using a torque wrench to tighten it down. Alright, so now it's time to run the new wire back to the plastic carrier. First, make sure the wire is resting inside of that metal clip. And then, since there was actually extra wire on the new sensor compared to the old one, I had to figure out a way to wrap it up and around the carrier to make sure none of it was hanging down. And then, once I got the wire all situated, I went ahead and slid the connector end back into the right spot. And then after that, it was just a matter of connecting the sensor to the wire that goes to the engine. Alright, now that that's done, go ahead and put the plastic panel back on the underside of the car. Slide the front of the panel in first, to make sure that's all situated, and then go ahead and start tightening down on those fasteners. Remember, use a 10mm wrench.